Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Making It. Now, we've been working in the creator economy for years between us, and we've done lots of different roles in that time. So today we wanted to start ranking the different roles that you can have within the creator economy, specifically for YouTubers. We're going to look at the things that are really fun about the roles and the things that can be a little bit stressful and less fun, and we're going to basically just put them on a tier list to show you what we think are like the most desirable, fun roles that you can have in this industry. So we're going to start off with a big one. It's thumbnail designer. I'm curious, Jamie probably is the person who's done the most in terms of thumbnail design. What are your thoughts, thumbnail designer?
I would say thumbnail design should probably be like S tier. I think it should be the best, only because making thumbnails is quite fun. I've always preferred it because you can just like play music, sit there and get creative, and you can work out like variations of different thumbnails, which you then get to test on YouTube and learn about like this art and science blend of trying to make thumbnails that not only look good but actually are quite clickable, and use things like psychology to help you get the click. So I think there's a lot of fun components that go into it, but it can also be an awful role if you're working with YouTubers who don't give you a brief, don't really know what it is that they want, if they give you terrible photos to work with, or they just give you like poor assets and then just ask you to do something which is almost impossible or would require many hours when they're paying you a low amount. So it's one of those things where it depends on who you're working with. But I think if in the ideal world where everything's great, it's like the best role to have, I feel, in the creator economy.
I like that, although I think we probably can't ignore that thing. And I think the briefs thing that you mentioned, and maybe this will end up being a feature across all the roles, but I wonder, like you say, in an ideal world, the briefs would always be good. But in terms of like the average number of times the brief is really good, I wonder if that potential frustration brings it down a little bit, or if that is actually just going to be symptomatic of this entire video. I guess maybe we'll see. I would be, even though I've not done it, I would be willing, like pushing to bring that down to like an A in light of that potential stress. But I don't know if you have any other thoughts, Gwilym.
I honestly, I was thinking more like B, C for me. This is obviously subjective. Yeah, in terms of how fun I would find it, definitely. Because for me, when I work with thumbnail designers, the briefing and figuring out what the concept is, that is the most fun part, which as a thumbnail designer, you generally do with a producer or someone else. If the creator knows what they're doing, they're going to be talking pretty in depth with the thumbnail designer about the idea before they actually execute it. And so for me, the most fun part of the job is that, and you can get a lot of that by doing other roles, including scriptwriter or producer. So, and I don't enjoy, to be fair, I haven't tried it that much. So I don't think I'd enjoy doing all the details of fine-tuning the design and getting everything to pop as much. So I would rank it lower.
I think this is going to be the difficult thing with this video is that we're all going to have different things, right? We're all going to, like, I like doing that work in Photoshop, so I would rank it higher. Where Gwilym's like, I'm not a thumbnail designer, I'd rank it lower.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to compromise.
Yeah, we're going to have to compromise. I just think that if we don't have an S tier for a thumbnail designer, I don't think any other roles that we have that are coming up will surpass that. I don't think we'll have anything in the S tier.
Thumbnail designers get so much like crap chucked at them. Like, can you do it by tomorrow, please? And like,
but
why
it comes
is
down,
our
I guess,
why is our shitty photo not looking amazing? You failed.
Yeah,
at
but
life.
then, like I said, I think that then comes down to the job of the thumbnail designer and the clients that they're working with.
Yes,
right?
if you have the ideal job, if we're working with the best people and it's amazing, then yes, S tier, same for like most of these. But the average thumbnail designer does not have it that easy or that nice. So I would say, I would say B tier, A tier at most.
I think I'm as something of a mediator in this fast becoming violent discussion. I would say maybe. I don't know, this is what I said originally. Maybe we stick it at an A, because I think the weight of you, Jamie, who like does this more and saying that you enjoy it slightly outweighs your argument, Gwilym, of like just not enjoying those specific aspects of it. I guess you take it as a given that a thumbnail designer probably would. but I am definitely more on your side in terms of that, like, yeah, the client side not always being perfect. But I'm sure a lot of thumbnail designers would say, yes, I love the work itself. So yeah, I'd be mindful to stick it at an A for now.
Cool. Thumbnail designers, please let us know what you think.
Yeah. I think it does, like you said, it depends. Because when I was younger and I was working on thumbnails with some clients that weren't the greatest, who would just kind of give you something and want you to do everything, you don't find it that enjoyable. But now I've got to a point with experience of knowing what jobs to accept and what not to accept. And so now I'm in a position where I tend to enjoy it quite a lot. But then, like I said, you can apply that to, a producer, an editor, any role in the YouTube space. So that's why I thought we would go with like slightly idealized versions of it. Because if we're saying, oh, everyone has nightmare client, then nothing's going to be higher than an F. Everyone's going to be down there because we don't like working with people who are a nightmare.
Although, let's see, like, because the next role we were going to talk about is a researcher, and I wonder if this like issue with the brief being good or bad, whether that will impact a role like this any less. So, like, I mean, Gwilym, I guess you're
let's define it.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, if you're a researcher, you are not writing the script. You are generally going to be working with, let's say, Dodford, for example, who does videos about celebrities. If you're his researcher, I imagine you're going to be he's saying, I want to make a really good video about Jack Black. I want to find out all the details of his past and tell me what the interesting story points are. Build this into like a brief for me. So it's not like a optimized script. It's more like a list of, this is what happened in his childhood. This is what happened later on. These are some interesting points you might not have known about him, etc. Like doing all that background work. If you're working on a tech channel, then it's maybe more like, hey, go and find out all the new specs for the iPad Pro. What are the problems with it? And then someone else turns it into a script. So yeah, how do you feel about this role, George?
Again, maybe this is like an opinion thing, but I prefer the process of constructing the script. I think that's where kind of it's like more the art side rather than the science side of it. And so for me, like the research, I'm just not. It's not really my thing. So I would rank this kind of like, I feel like you're so far away from the final result, even though ultimately you're like finding all the building blocks, how that then becomes a video that gets 1 million views versus 100,000 views. You're quite divorced from that process. So for me, it doesn't feel as closely impactful. So I'd rank it a little bit lower, but I think you probably did more of the research side of things. Like you worked on more Ali scripts than me, more tech scripts for Ali than me. So I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think so. What I enjoyed was the fact that I was doing research and script writing. The research was a bit of a break from thinking in creative mode, like, oh, how do I like massage this intro to be the most effective? And the research was just like, I'm going to look at headphones and I'm going to make a nice little spreadsheet of like which one has the best, like, I don't know, impedance scores or whatever. So it is fun. It is relaxing. If you're doing something more advanced, like a video about how to sleep properly or something like that, then it's a lot of watching Andrew Huberman and reading medical journal notes. So I think you need the right people doing it. I think it can be rewarding, especially if you're an expert in the field and you're doing the research, but I don't think I would find it very fun doing it full time. I'd probably put it in like maybe a D, maybe C, which feels harsh, but we do have to put things lower down, right? So we can't put everything in A or B.
Yeah, that's true. For me, it would be a D. I don't know, Jamie, if you have any closing thoughts on this, if this is something you've really done much in your career or not so much.
I mean, I've done research for scripts and things, but I would never really call myself a researcher. I've worked with a few researchers in the past. I worked with Gwilym on a few videos where he did a lot of research, but it didn't like necessarily benefit me because Gwilym was on writing the script. So like I would see all the research and he would do, you do a lot of it, like the evidence-based skincare routine video, like there was a lot of information there, but to me as the YouTube producer, it's nice to look at and kind of go, okay, like there's a lot of interesting information here. But I know that then gets passed to the writer, which in this case was also Gwilym. And so then I'd rather work with Gwilym on the script rather than research. But I have worked with other researchers in the past on different channels. And yeah, it's one of those things where it depends on how good they are as a researcher. Like I've worked with people who are specific to being a researcher and they do a great job. And then you get some people who aren't researchers, but can go, oh, I can do that. I can go on Google and find some things. And they kind of go down the path and they just give you a PDF of like 30 pages. And it's like, now I've got to try and pull everything out of this. And it's just like, you've made more work for me. And so again, like I don't have much experience with researchers, but I would probably agree. I should go in the D tier.
Okay, let's put it in a D. Let's go big. Let's go spiky. Researcher is a D. Now, Jamie, you touched on your time as a producer. So that is the next one on the list. What are your thoughts on what it is like to be a producer?
Yeah, so I've been a YouTube producer on 2 or 3 channels now, and I really like this role. I think it is quite fun because you get to sort of be part of the entire process. So you work directly with the YouTuber, you work with a videographer, you work with a video editor. In my case, I would always make the thumbnail designs, but sometimes we would outsource things. So you get to work with them. So it's quite fun and you learn quite a lot in that process. I always think, if you're in a position where you've been, in the past, you've been like a jack of all trades, you've worked with a lot of different people. Like this is a good position for you to start to develop in because you get to really take your understanding of YouTube to the next level and you get to work with a lot of creative people. And so it's quite fun. But with that being said, there is a lot of stress that comes with it. It can be quite time consuming. You can be the bottleneck a lot of the times because you have to approve certain like video edits or thumbnail designs, and it requires a lot of brain power. And it can be intense depending on how many videos you're putting out at a time, if you have other roles and responsibilities within a business. So I would say this is, to me, it's on the edge of like a B and a C. I'd say it
Jamie,
sits about there.
What are you doing?
What?
Do you
What's wrong with that?
It's clearly S tier. I love producing. I think it's the best. I think it's the best one, arguably, because for all the reasons that Jamie mentioned at the beginning, and I thought he was going towards A or S tier. But just because you get to do everything, there's so much. I forget what it is. When people talk about job satisfaction, it's how much correlation is there between your inputs and the outputs that you get. Well, when you're a producer, you can say, I want the thumbnail to be different, and the script needs to be different, and maybe we should film it in a different way, and maybe we should have a totally different organizational structure, and maybe we should film everything batch filmed on the start of the week or spread throughout the month or whatever. So there's so much. So there is a lot of responsibility. Yes, you can be the bottleneck. Yes, you can't just kind of clock off that easily if a video needs to go out the next day, but it's so rewarding. I would put it at an S easily.
I would say though that I don't know if we're allowed to talk about who you work for, even though it is public knowledge. But as a YouTube producer, everything that I have seen from you guys and when I've worked with you on a few thumbnail designs, it is very much like a well-oiled ship. Whereas with working with Ali, as you know, like things would change every 5 minutes. It was very chaotic. And so I think my experience at times there was stressful because it was running not only his channel, but also we tried to launch the Part-Time Creator Academy channel on the side. And then also these 101 other things. And so, yeah, for me, like there was a lot of things that I was in charge of. Whereas from what I understand from you guys, it's like well-oiled machine. It seems to be in a very good position. And so I can imagine it is a lot higher up on your list than it is for me.
Yeah, to be fair, massive caveat, depends on which creator you're working with. So I could see downgrading it to an A based on that, maybe.
Let's go with an A because I said B, like B to C tier. I feel like it's on the edge. So I think A is appropriate.
All right, next up, looking at our list, we've got editors. How do we feel about editing?
Without kind of going down the same path of it depends which client you have. It depends what client you have. Like it's the exact same thing as a thumbnail designer.
I want to jump in with a stat that I think I had got from the editing podcast, which is, I believe, the second most stressful, the job that reports the second amount most stress in the US after doctors is video editors.
Yeah, I can see
Interesting.
that. I can see that.
And my theory is that they, like, it's almost like the buck doesn't stop with them in terms of responsibility, but in terms of producing a good, coherent video. It's when the video editor delivers their first cut that everyone is like, oh, that's the kind of video we've been making.
You
And
bake the
it's
cake.
so, yeah, you bake the cake, and it's so easy for everyone to say, oh, editor has made mistakes, or editor, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so easy for stuff to come your way with editor. You need to now fix everything in post, like the dreaded fix everything in post command, right?
Well, yeah, that's giving me PTSD.
Yeah, if you can't hold your own and manage to work with people who are reasonable and don't have crazy expectations, then yeah, fun. But yeah, sorry, I'm going down that route again. Depends on the client. I think often editors get a bad deal, and it's not that fun to do. But it's such an art form. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is an art form, I think, and that's the tricky thing, is that a lot of the time you're trying to convert the art form that the creator had in their head or the scriptwriter had in their head and put that on the page. And I think it's kind of like, it's like when you see the backstory to a character in a film that you like, or you get the reveal at the end of a TV show that's been running for years and years. It's rarely as good as you had envisioned it in your head. And I think that's probably the issue that even the best editors in the world will come up against, is that problem. And you know, speaking as primarily a scriptwriter, that's something that I've had in the past when I've worked with editors, where I've always tried that they're so interlinked, the script writing and the editing, but I think a lot of people don't see it that way and kind of expect the editor to just fix anything. And the editors that I've worked with in the past, or one in particular, I remember he said, like, thank you for just even going 10% overboard with your visual directions and things, because it turns their job from a blank slate into something that just has a little bit more direction. But I think there probably is that, there's like a maybe a misinterpretation of how much effort will have to go into one tiny tweak that you mention on frame. A lot of the time be like, oh, that doesn't look very good. And actually you maybe don't know the amount of effort that's already gone into it, and how difficult it is to like extract the egg from the now baked cake and then try and like rebake it into something that's that's superficially similar but maybe is harder. So yeah, I'd be with you. I think in terms of enjoyment, I think yeah, we're probably looking at more like but equally the impact on the output is really high. So I'd be thinking maybe a C, but maybe a D, because it is a bum deal in many ways.
Yeah, at the same time, you can say, look, I edited this video, and people can say like, wow, you edited the video. And often the moments where I am like, where I say, wow, amazing, oh my God, someone blew my mind, is often when the editor delivers an edit that is just amazing. And it is nice bringing the cake out after you've baked it, right? And everyone goes, wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd be maybe more BC tier. What are your thoughts, Jamie?
Yeah.
You've done more editing.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of editing. You know, I always wanted to be an editor. When I was younger, I edited over 400 videos on my own YouTube channel. Had a job that was all editing, but it was for like commercial stuff in London, and that was a fun job to have, because you do a mixture of like videography and then edit it. And then I worked for a YouTube agency where it was just like very intense editing, and that was less enjoyable because it just felt more like you were on a production line. It just felt like it was very similar output. Like I can imagine if you're a YouTube Shorts editor who is just kind of like doing closed captions and listening to what people say, writing it down, if you're not using like an AI tool, that can be really boring and draining and not fun. But if you're a YouTube Shorts editor who's doing like all these fancy 3D graphics and storytelling, I can imagine that's way more fun. And I also think there's an element of like who you're working for. So not just like, is the brief good from the YouTube, more like, are you editing for yourself or for someone else? Because I would always find that when I was editing for my own YouTube videos or for my own projects, the enjoyment level was like 100 times higher, because I intuitively know. I do feel when you're editing, there's an intuition there of like, the music should come in here, we should like, this clip should go ahead, maybe not this. And you play around with the timeline like it's a puzzle. Try to find what's right. And I think when you're editing your own video, you're like one and the same, you know, there's this really, you can get into the flow. Whereas I think when you're editing for a YouTuber or any other client, if we, step outside of the YouTube world, there's an element of, does this fit the brief? Is this what they would want? Do they like this? Do they not like this? And then having to go through that process of version 1, version 2, version 3. But especially if you have someone who hasn't given you that clear path or needs to see version 1 before they understand where they want to go with version 2, and then they want to change everything. It's like Gwilym said, sometimes you just get it and you're like, wow, this is perfect. Like the editor just got this. But then other times you can get something, you're like, oh, this is completely not what we wanted. Like we now need to go back to square one almost and re-edit the whole thing, which again, kind of goes back to being the YouTube producer. That could be stressful if you've got like this sponsorship deadline and it's like, it was meant to go out on this day. And now you've got to have difficult conversations and try and reinvent the wheel. And as you say, George, sometimes it's hard to take the egg back out of the cake when things are done. So I do think being an editor can be quite stressful. And I do think your fun levels can go down the more you have to edit. So if you nail it in like V1, V2, that's good. But the longer it goes on, the less that you're going to drop down to like a C tier.
So where are we putting it? B? George is looking like a C. Okay.
Not that I've done it. Hey, I used to edit my own channel like years ago, but
Jamie,
I would think
you're
a C.
Decide.
Oh, I'm going to have all the video editors hate me depending on where I put this. There's going to be some video editors out there who should be like, no, it should be yes. And there's others who are going to say it's a D tier. I will say, I think it's a B tier. I think people get a lot of enjoyment out of it.
Editors, thank you for all you go through.
Yeah.
Okay, next up is brand/sponsorship manager. You guys know a bit more about this than I do, because Jamie, you've negotiated sponsorships for Ali, I believe, and George, you've worked with Justin Moore, the sponsorship guy. So yeah, I want you guys' opinion on this. What do you reckon? Good job, bad job?
I'm see, this is the thing, is I've been completely indoctrinated by the Justin Moore school of thought on this. In that his I bet, I can really see the arguments for it, is that he basically, his argument is that they shouldn't really exist. You shouldn't have, as a YouTuber, a sponsorship manager specifically, because the incentives aren't necessarily aligned. So like if they take a cut of every deal, they are obviously incentivized to try and get as many deals as possible within limits, which may not have your best interest as the YouTuber at heart. Maybe this speaks to where it would be ranked because of that like slightly quote compromised position. Maybe it feels like less of a clear value add than say an editor. Like I personally, I can edit just about, but I can't edit in the way I would want to edit. So I need to hire an editor. I can negotiate my own sponsorships. And this is very much the other argument that Justin makes that kind of sold it to me is, I'm actually proofreading his book at the moment, so this stuff is very top of mind. It is that you as the creator really ought to stay in control of the information and the knowledge that comes with having to negotiate your own sponsorships. Because even the three of us for this podcast, having to negotiate the first few sponsorships that we've had as a three has been very different. Even though we've all variously dealt with sponsorships before, being in the weeds of that stuff can be really, really helpful. And so I think my opinion on like where this should be ranked is kind of based on all of this feeling, where it almost feels like a hard sell for me to pitch myself as a sponsorship manager, when actually I would be thinking, but really I think you should probably be doing this yourself, because the incentives are more aligned and it keeps you on top of how all this stuff works. Were, for example, the brand manager to resign or not be able to work for a couple of weeks or something, and suddenly you as the creator are left without the knowledge of how to actually do the stuff yourself. So I would be, but in terms of the job itself, I don't know enough about the job itself. I would imagine it's a lot of emails, but I don't know enough. So I'd be mindful to put it at around probably a C tier again. Maybe even, you know what? I'm going to go with an E.
What you're saying sounds low.
You just went from a B to an E. Like what just happened for that big drop?
No, a C to an E. Because I was thinking, well, it was partly because I want to try and be a bit spiky about it. But partly because I don't know enough, but I don't like the role enough as a thing that should exist. So but hey, any hate or that you've got, forward it on to Justin Moore. He's responsible for my thoughts and opinions. Jamie, though, I'm curious.
Yeah, so I've been on both sides. I have been a sponsorship. I wouldn't call it a sponsorship manager, but I've worked in a TikTok agency where we dealt with a lot of sponsorships and we worked with influencers. And then I also was Ali's sponsorship manager and would get on a lot of calls with sponsors. And it's quite fun being on that side of the thing, being a sponsorship manager for a YouTuber. Because as you say, a lot of the sponsorships agencies out there, they take a large cut. They try and do multiple deals. Sometimes they don't always have what's best in mind for the YouTuber. Whereas obviously, if you're the YouTuber negotiating yourself or someone in your team is negotiating on your behalf, it's a little bit different. And I always find it quite fun being on the YouTuber side, trying to negotiate a higher rate. And it's just really thrilling when you can get like $30,000, confirmed for like 5 videos. Sometimes we did that for only like 2 videos, and it's just like a buzz where it's just like, oh my god, I can't believe like we just did that. Compared to having a client give you a ton of money and then just going out and giving it to people who you think will get you the amount of views that you need. So I think it can be quite fun. But that being said, I think the actual day-to-day role is a bit boring. It's a lot of emails, it's a lot of follow-ups. And I think that drags it down quite a bit. So I would put it maybe like the C tier, C. I would say.
Would be
C.
Yeah, because you get, if
wanna...
you're a sponsorship manager, you get to work with so many cool influencers. You get to be on calls with them. You get to build up your network quite a lot. That's quite a nice benefit. And it feels more like your job is just being friendly with these people, making friends and, building that relationship so that they want to work with you more and to develop that connection with the brand. So I think that's where I'd put it.
Just from my 2 cents, I'm not that familiar with the whole world, but from what I hear, it doesn't sound as interesting as any of the other jobs.
Yeah, it's not as creative.
Creatively. So, yeah.
I kind of want to put it at least a D.
Yeah.
I don't think this is...
We're not putting anything else much lower than that.
Considering researcher is at a D, I don't feel like this is biting at the heels of like an editor role. It's probably more in line with a researcher role.
But it feels wrong putting it as a D though. Like getting £30,000 deal confirmed is way more fun than being a researcher. Like, let's be real.
You're the only guy that's done it. We have to do it as a C. I think
just gonna be we put nothing below D really then. Well, we'll see. Next up, we have personal assistant. So a lot of creators have personal assistants once they get to a high enough level. They need someone to manage their calendar, to fetch things that need fetching, props, whatever. They need someone to liaise with people they're doing collabs with. What else do personal assistants do, guys?
Well, they get almost everything thrown to them that can't be done by another role.
Emails, they deal with, they flooded with emails. It's
probably not that fun.
Okay, I'm going to say, off the bat, I think maybe this goes to D or E tier if you do it for any longer than you need to be doing it. I think it's a good starting point to... So if you look at, again, Ali, for example, Elizabeth Phillips started off basically being his executive assistant, which is, I guess, the fancy version of personal assistant, and learned all the ropes. I imagine it was really useful for her, learning things about YouTube. Maybe not. I don't know all the ins and outs of that. So if you do it for like 9 months and you learn everything you can learn, I can see the value, but much beyond that, just taking it as a pure role, as like a career path, so to speak, I would say E, because you're doing a bunch of the stuff that other people don't want to be doing, and you're not getting that much credit or portfolio to show for it, other than I work with this creator.
Yeah, I think especially if we're thinking from a YouTube standpoint, you want to get into YouTube, you like the process of YouTube, it's probably a little too divorced from that. So I'd be... coming from a room full of people who haven't really done this as a full-time job at all, I'd be with you on an E, I think. Jamie?
I don't really have an opinion on it, so I'll
Cool.
leave it up to you guys for where we're putting it.
Okay, let's stick it in there then.
Personal assistants, you can shout at us in the comments if you love your job. Okay, next on the list, we have strategist / consultant. I guess a bit of crossover between those roles, but I'd be curious to hear from you, Jamie, like what you see as the intersection. Are these distinct roles, or like why is it that we put them together, basically?
Oh, what a question that is. I mean, that is a question.
Do the heavy lifting for us, Jamie.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people see them as the exact same. Other people see them as different. It's interesting. I speak to a lot of different consultants, and I always ask them that question of like, are you a strategist, a consultant, or a coach? Because some people use that interchangeably. And I always get completely different answers. And so it's hard to sort of detangle that. And I don't even want to attempt to, especially in a bite-sized way for us right now. I would say strategists and consultants are quite fun. I think they are similar to a producer. I think like producers make for the best strategists and consultants because you have to understand how each domino falls into the next, mostly because they're all interconnected. So like your packaging, your title, and your thumbnail absolutely affects the hook and the rest of the script, and all of that integrates with the edits. And like you can just, everything is interconnected. And I think that being a strategist and consultant, you really need to understand the whole process. You can obviously have strengths in specific areas, and you can go into that a little bit more, and you find that they're more enjoyable. So for me, take my career, the last 2 years, I've been a YouTube strategist / consultant. It's been quite general. I've worked with YouTubers of all kinds, and all my client conversations are completely different because they all have different sort of problems that we're helping them to get over. But I'm now starting to find I really like talking about the ideas, the title, the thumbnails, and the hooks. And so I'm starting to niche myself a little bit more down into that because that's just more enjoyable. I would put this at an A tier.
Yeah, I mean, just to recap for people who don't know, if you're a strategist / consultant, most of your work is probably getting on calls with clients of an hour or two, or maybe doing longer sessions with them, brainstorming their strategy and poking holes in what they're doing. What could you be doing better? How your system's working, etc. I would. Okay, so it's good. Yeah, I would say A tier, B tier, purely because the frustration is that you're not actually in there doing it with them, and you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. If you do work with a lot of different clients, I imagine how much you enjoy the job depends a lot on how effective you are actually getting people to implement what you say. Yeah, I'm happy with A tier. I've done some of it myself. I think it's pretty fun.
Interesting. My only, like this is probably a similar caveat again. It's like I've done limited amount of consulting, and it's part of some of my bigger, like my sort of higher ticket offers that I have. I like consulting with people that I get to talk to regularly, because I get to know them, and you get to know their channel and whatnot. I think I always, even though I feel like this every time, I underestimate the impact of having a call in my calendar, and usually at the end of the day, because usually it's in America and we're obviously based in the UK. That has such a weirdly outsized impact on how productive I am for the rest of the day that unless it's someone that I already know and I kind of have a sense of their channel already, having to like get ready for those one-off calls where you think I'm probably never going to speak to them again, I find that really stressful. And just like it just derails the day a little bit. So that's just something to think about. I don't know if that is something everyone would feel. I know you guys have like mentioned this similar kind of thing sometimes, like the anxiety that comes with having a call in the calendar. I don't think that's uncommon, but maybe for certain personality types, it suits really well. So my thought would be to move it lower to a B, but depends what. If you are both on an A, then I'm
happy to push it to a B. I was on the fence, to be honest. I think if we're talking about the general strategist consultant who is not at the level of a Paddy Galloway, where you have your fingers in many pies and are being paid a lot. I know we're not discussing payment that much, but I'm happy to downgrade it to a B purely because of all the context switching, the calls, and the fact that you can't make stuff happen. You're always in the position of giving advice, but not really seeing it necessarily followed through.
I think that's a good rationale. Okay, we'll throw it in at a B. It joins the likes of editor.
Okay, for our listeners on audio, Working our way up, we have got in F tier nothing. E tier, we've got personal assistant. D, we've got researcher. C, we've got brand/sponsorship manager. B, we've got editors and strategists and consultants. In A tier, we've got thumbnail designers and producers, and we have nothing in S tier yet. However, is that going to be challenged by our
I
next
feel like
contestant?
everything that we've put an S tier immediately gets pulled down. So I don't know if anything's going to do it. But maybe the next one is.
Possibly
I would
not.
argue that the next
just
one
trying to
could be. But
excite the people, Jamie. Trying to excite the people.
the next role we should discuss is YouTuber. And I was going to say, if you have a team, sometimes it can be an S tier, but it depends on how you set your team up. For most YouTubers I know who have a team, it's not an S tier because you're managing so many people and it can be quite stressful. If you are a solo YouTuber, it can also be an S tier if you enjoy it and you're in that sweet spot of you have the skills in order to create the content that you want. But if you're having, quite complicated editing that's needed, or you need a lot of scripts, you might not find that you enjoy it, and so you can put it down. So again, I just can't see it getting put in an S tier. I think it's got to come down to an A to B.
Yeah, I gotta say, if you're looking at it as a profession, like something that you do, and that you approach with the same mentality as the rest of these things, yes, I see that. However, you can't beat it for having a crazy vision and executing it over multiple years and having this crazy thing blowing up in a way that you never expected.
If you're a successful YouTuber, like, you get all of the rewards. Whereas if you're in any of these other roles, you just get payment. And, at any moment you could lose your job. The payment might not be enough for your lifestyle. Whereas when you're the YouTuber, you get all of the views, the subscribers, the people in your own email list, the sponsorship money, the AdSense, the fame, the glory, you get everything. And so there's a lot that kind of just like makes the stress worth it compared to other roles, which are more of a trading time for money sort of situation.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't agree with that. I think you can be an editor who does it for the love of the art and the creativity and all that stuff. And if you lose one client, you move on to the next, and that's just what you love doing.
Yeah, but then you can say that for everything, every single role.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, you can. And so that's the level at which you would compare the creator executing their vision versus like the thumbnail designer executing their vision.
But I think ultimately the thumbnail designer or whoever's vision is impacted by the creator's vision. And I think it's probably easier for the YouTuber to pivot that vision at the drop of a hat, whether or not it's a good idea and whether or not the team is screaming at them to just keep the vision stationary for like 5 seconds. You still have that flexibility and that freedom. So I don't know if that adds to it.
We've all seen YouTubers getting frustrated at the market dictating what they have to be doing and if they want to make successful videos. So I guess in a way you're the person you're answerable to is the audience and YouTube algorithm. So that's a tricky spot to be in. I've seen quite a few business channels, for example, who just seem to have to pivot towards doing more like international affairs because they just get insanely more views for it than they do from business breakdowns, for example. So yeah, okay, let's call it. What are we saying? I feel like we're doing the thing again. S tier to A tier.
I think A.
Yeah,
I think it's a solid A.
Ultimately, it should be something that you love, but I think there are enough frustrations that you see with it. And I think your point about the market, Gwilym, actually at the end is really, really, really true. So I think, is there a perfect role? Possibly not, but we will see. Okay, so next on the list, we move on to the scriptwriter. Could this be the one to take us to an S tier? No. Just going to say that straight away. No, absolutely not.
Okay. George and I have been scriptwriting for a while. George more than I recently. What is great about scriptwriting is what's great about just any writing, which is that you can be really creative. You can unleash your brain on the page and come up with lots of cool ways of doing things, mixing and matching ideas. You get to see the words come to life in the video, so to speak. But it also comes with all the massive frustrations of writing. It's quite masochistic in some ways being a scriptwriter. You're just like banging your head against the wall, trying to get a hook or an intro written for an hour or two, and just nothing is working. And then you just go and have a coffee, and then you come back and you have another crack at it. Yeah, my trauma is pouring out of me. George, what do you think?
Yeah, I was just looking up a quote. I forget who it's by, but it's like writers. I think the quote is, "I hate to write, but I love having written," past tense. And that kind of feels how it is a lot of the time. You're right. The creativity that you can put into it, you have more control over what that video comes out as ultimately than the editor, I'm going to say, only because they can execute the vision, but the vision that you create is yours. Or rather, it might be the YouTuber who passes it on to you, but ultimately, there are shots on the internet now of Justin Moore saying and doing like weird, bizarre things that would never have otherwise existed if not for what I wrote. There is a joke about the sofa company DFS in one of Creator Booth's videos that would not exist on the internet if not for me writing it. And I'm sure, there will be many similar examples from you, Gwilym, and, for anyone who's written scripts. So that side of it is really cool. But yeah, it comes with, many similar frustrations that you spoke about, just the act of having to write a tool. There's also the difficulty, which is probably very similar to what editors experience, of maintaining that vision between the creator and you. It's really, really difficult to kind of align those things sometimes. And then ultimately, and I see this in my script writing community, is that a lot of the time you can have something that is really good, but then you put it out there for other people to critique, and suddenly it gets torn down, or even it just gets rewritten in a way that you could never have thought of, but is now totally different. Maybe it's better, maybe it's worse. Then it's like, how do you judge objectively what is good or bad? So it can feel like a real uphill battle to get better at it as a skill as well. So yeah, I sort of feel like I'm betraying it because ultimately I do really love it, but I would be mindful to put it as like B/C.
I was thinking B.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wasn't expecting B, considering how you both just completely destroyed it. I was expecting a C or a D tier. How you guys?
It's a love-hate relationship, Jamie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's someone who's not a
ultimately,
script writer but does write scripts. I hate it. I would want to put it lower. I just don't think it's enjoyable.
Like, the nice thing is that you arguably have the closest relationship with the audience member who's watching the video than anyone else. People, obviously the editor does on a more like visceral level because they're showing them and telling them, but as a scriptwriter, you are providing the information and the content that people are sticking around for, and the thoughts that they're having after they walk away and stop watching the video are going to be the thoughts that you had when you were writing, which is just a really cool thing to experience.
I think it depends as well on like what you define as a script. Like, if I don't like writing word for word scripts because they take up so much more time compared to if I was writing a bullet point script. I wouldn't call it more fun because I don't particularly enjoy it, but it's definitely not the bane of my life. So I think that does influence it, but I'll go with whatever you two think it should be.
I think B is good call.
Yeah, I think it shares the similar thing of like getting to put it, like I will cast a video on my TV when it comes out if I've written it, and it's like a little mini kind of cinema premiere type thing, and that is rewarding. So yeah, I go with the B.
Cool.
All right. Next up, videographers, or if you're feeling fancy, directors of photography. These are different roles. It's hard to say exactly what
slightly
they are.
Different. Videographer. So I worked as a videographer for about 4 months, and I didn't particularly enjoy it. I think there's some really nice things that come with that job. It wasn't for a YouTuber, bear in mind. It was just like a general videographer role, but the things I didn't like about it do translate to working for YouTubers. There are nice things about it. You get to go to interesting places and film interesting things with interesting people. The downsides is that it typically means like waking up at the crack of dawn, having to go to the storage unit to collect heavy film equipment that you have to drag around. You have to then set it all up. And for me, I was doing this when I was younger, when I was like 20, 21. And so I should have loads of energy. But for me, it was so draining having to just drag heavy equipment around. And then try and use like your then creative mind to find the right camera angles, to film something, to think about the storytelling nature of the video when your body is exhausted. I mean, I think a lot of videographers, it's a lot easier now because of most people have run and gun. It tends to just be an iPhone or a small camera rig that you have on your shoulder. Back in the day, it was a little bit more intense than that. I don't particularly like it. I would say it's quite stressful. I don't like it. Even now, I have this setup that's constantly set up at my desk for when I want to record YouTube videos, because I hate, where's the battery? Is it charged? What's the SD card? Is it full? Let me set it up. Let me get the camera angle right. And then you've got to go do the B-roll, which is where you need someone else to film you, but then you have to set up the tripod if you want to do it by yourself. And it's just like, this is frustrating. It's nowhere near as fun as sitting there, sipping on coffee with music playing, making a thumbnail. And so I just don't like videography. I'll leave it for the others who enjoy it. But I'm putting that at E tier. I'm going harsh.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay,
I did think D, but
step,
I'm going to say E.
I'm going to step to the defense of the videographers. I disagree. Okay, so I agree on the point that it is a pain to have to be the first one there and the last one to leave, and is all the memory, are all the SD cards prepped? Usually people are looking to you on filming day to make everything perfect, and sometimes it's just a lot of hassle. On the other hand, and caveat, I've never been a videographer, so I don't really know. This is just my general impression. If you're doing run and gun stuff in really cool locations, you have a lot of control over how the story is going to go. If you're talking to the creator, you're the sort of the hidden second creator on location doing all the crazy stuff. There's just so much creativity that goes into it. Again, if you're doing run and gun more than if you're just doing locked off A-roll, that I would put it higher. I'd say like solid B. Just every time you see the video, you again get to see, this is the stuff I shot. This is how I decided it would be. I lit that beautifully. Oh, this was a great interaction. You get to experience all the things the creator experiences. And yeah, them's my thoughts.
This is a tricky one because I'd love to mediate and like give my thought, but yeah, I don't have any sort of impression of it, having not done it. Other than that, yeah, they're there for a long time, and I just also remember seeing a lot of when we worked with Ali, like videographer sat there, memory cards everywhere, all just stuff plugged in, like uploading files, moving files. Because I hear what you're saying, Gwilym, but I get the impression that side of it, the creative side of it, is kind of only half the job, and then the other side of it is like relentless admin and really high stakes admin, where if you wipe this memory card too soon, then that's a problem.
A few times.
Yeah, I can imagine. So yeah, I don't know. I can't really give a ranking on it.
I'm gonna say this is a really hard one to call because it depends so much on the job, just so much. I feel like what you're talking about, Jamie, it relates more to if you're working with like a typical
commercial
A-roll educational, yeah. But if you're Michelle Carre's videographer, totally different ballgame.
Yeah, like for
like
me, commercial on location, like big stakes, that I think is more intense. I'd prefer to be a videographer how Gordon was for Ali. It's like the equipment's all there. You kind of know the setups that you need to set up for the talking head at the desk. That's relatively simple. Life is a lot easier there than what I was doing, which was, having to travel to Cannes to film Stephen Bartlett doing a talk. And there's just like 101 different things you need to do. And it's just stressful to get that right. So if you said B, I said E. I think let's just put it at C.
Okay, C. I'm happy with that. Based on stress.
Last is the analyst. Do any of us have experience in this? I have experience working with a group.
Okay, so when we were drawing up the list, we were like, George and I were both like, analyst, isn't that similar to strategist, consultants? And Jamie, you said there is a difference. So what is the difference?
There is a slight difference, yes. So, and they are different in the fact that they have a one sole job, which is to crunch data in, on the YouTube Studio dashboard. And they spend a lot more time looking at things like your retention graphs, let's say, and actually breaking it down, not just scrolling over it and going, oh, it dropped 1% here. What happened on screen? Like, they actually think a lot more in depth about this. When I worked with Ali as the YouTube producer, we had this company called Dragon Fruit Media, I believe they were called. And we would just have a call once a month where they would review the last few videos, and they would basically give us these do's and don'ts. And it had some really key insights that were very useful, which we then applied to videos going forwards. And we did see a benefit as a result. It's very nice to have something like that when you're a YouTube producer, especially someone who is more, into the geeky number side of things, where they're not so much just focused on the creative, but actually the ones and zeros of what actually goes into the art side of the creative. So there is a slight difference. It's kind of just more like a really hyper-focused strategist role, whereas a YouTube strategist sometimes can do a little bit more than that. And as you said, with a strategist, some strategists are just an hour a week or an hour every 2 weeks, where as a strategist is usually like looking over a long period of time at multiple videos and coming to conclusions and giving you future hypotheses to test with future videos.
Got it. So what's it actually like to be an analyst? Like, is it fun? I don't know. I have no real understanding.
Well, I've not been one, but working with them, I think you need to be a certain kind of individual. You're someone who likes working with numbers and being very detail orientated. I think that this is a little bit different from some of the other roles that we've had. I do think it is less creative and it's more technical in terms of like drawing conclusions based on math, essentially, because there's a lot of numbers that you can see in that studio dashboard, and
But
finding that across multiple videos.
You also have to have some of the scriptwriter skills in being able to interpret what are people watching, what are they doing at certain points. So someone like Mario Juice, who is sort of strategist, consultant, probably leaning towards analyst in some cases, he has to know what is exactly happening on screen to make people feel a certain way to click off. So there's a lot of creative interpretation, I would say, or interpretation that requires a creative brain. So I imagine I would find it quite fun. I would just say probably I'd stick it in C, based on what I know of it, but that's a very uninformed ranking.
I think, I'd probably say that, but I don't know. I'd be tempted to push it up to a B. Only so like my two kind of thoughts on this come from some of the more detailed retention stuff that I've done for some clients in more recent years, like back in the day, I started off just reviewing retention graphs in my newsletter. But then since I've been hired to do it for a couple of other channels that are like it's more intensive, I found that process really, really enjoyable, because it does require that slightly creative thinking. It requires you to, like you say, not just look at a drop, what happened here, but to think broad picture. Could there have been something that was happening in the first half of this video that has caused this drop here? And I think for someone who would go into this kind of role, they're likely to be that sort of whichever type person it would be anyway. So assuming, because I think for all of these, we're assuming that we're ranking it based on if you would like to do that role anyway, what rank would you give it? And then another, side point is that I was with a YouTube strategist, like having coffee, and he was showing me for, like multi-million subscriber channels that he does the analysis stuff for as well. It was so exciting to see that data on the page in a way that is not like, okay, you're faced with your YouTube studio. Where do you go? What do you click? Oh, it's kind of overwhelming. CTR, retention, I'm not really sure. But seeing them extract all that data, plot it in a bunch of graphs and see when we do X, Y happens. When we do Z, theta happens. That was really, really fun. And I think that does flow really nicely into the, the producer / channel manager type of thing, and allows you to really concretely say, like, this is an exciting thing we've discovered that works. Now let's repeat it. So I think for that little buzz that you would get if you are that kind of person, and from what I've experienced doing more detailed analysis on retention, I would put it as a B.
I'm happy with that. I accept that argument.
Cool.
Jamie, shall
Yeah,
we put it in
I
B?
think that works. Yes, let's put it in a B.
Okay.
We have a final ranking of, so we've been, I think, pretty nice, but also pretty conservative. We have disappointed all of our listeners by having nothing in the S category, and therefore possibly making our thumbnail harder to do. Okay, but so from top to bottom. So S tier, we have nothing. A tier, we have thumbnail designers, producers, and being the YouTuber yourself. In B, we have being an editor, being a strategist or consultant, scriptwriter or analyst. We've got brand sponsorship manager under C, also videographer under C. And for D, we've got researcher. For E, we've got personal assistant. How do you guys feel about that ranking?
I feel good. I know, weirdly, and maybe I'm ascribing meaning to something that doesn't really have meaning, but I kind of like the idea that nothing is in S, because I think it perfectly encapsulates that idea that YouTube isn't easy, and it's not something that you can just do that is like, hey, this is really fun, really easy, I make loads of money. It is always work at the end of the day, even though it's definitely one of the more fun jobs you can do. And so in a roundabout way, I think this is probably, whether the ordering is exactly right, I think the lack of S and the lack of F, to be honest, probably speaks to something that's quite truthful about this whole industry.
There is one role that we haven't included that I think could be the S tier, which is that some of the big YouTubers out there, they have a test audience. They show the video to people before the video goes live so they can make further tweaks to the edit. I would say that's probably an S tier. You just get to watch videos earlier and give feedback, right?
Just viewer, be
But
viewer.
I don't think we should include that. Maybe for the thumbnail, we just have like a blurred, censored block, and that's
Clickbait,
the
filthy clickbait.
But it's real now. It's real.
It's real.
We make
But-
it real. Okay.
Yeah. But
I
cool.
think
Yeah, I
all-
think looking at that list, I would say that seems correct. I think that's quite accurate to what most people would probably experience.
I would also say I think there's a big correlation between how high it is on the list and how much of a ownership you have over the final product. Considering that thumbnail designers sort of they have ownership, total ownership in a sense over the thumbnail, like they made the thumbnail and they're not that connected to the video itself. So I think that makes sense. I think the one I feel most uncomfortable about is videographer being in C. I'm not sure about that. But hey,
Let us know if you are one.
yes. Let us know in the comments if you are any of these roles, what your thoughts are. We have been a sometimes informed, sometimes uninformed arbiters of how good your job is. So yeah, please tell us exactly how we're wrong. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, consider subscribing wherever you are on YouTube or on audio. And if you would like to know more about how to hire a YouTube team and you want to hire one of these amazing, beautiful, creative roles that we've been talking about, you can click this video here. Or if you're on audio, go and find our video that is titled How to Hire a YouTube Team in 2024. Thanks.